Well, welcome, DC. Thanks for coming back to talk to us. I know we had a couple ideas for subject matter. Did you have a particular thing you wanted to talk about today, or do you want me to ask questions?
Oh yeah. So we said we were going to talk about the concept of Ori. I just wanted to hit on Oshun real quick because in Osobo and Yoruba land, they are celebrating Oshun, who is the goddess of fertility, love, and fresh waters. And she
Nice.
is kind of known to be, in a lot of places, chief of the feminine deities or archetypes. Uh, yeah, so it's Oshun, Oshun Day. Actually, I kind of want to sing a song to Oshun real quick.
That'd be
A quick
beautiful,
one.
friend.
Yeah. Ite were were nita Oshun, ita were were. Nita were were nita Oshun, nita were were nita iya. Ocha keniwa nita Oshun, shake nita iya. Nita were were. Nita were were nita Oshun, nita were were. Nita were were nita Oshun, nita were were nita iya. Ocha keniwa nita Oshun, shake nita iya. Nita were were. Yep, that's it. But yeah, so
Thank
we said we
you.
were going to talk about. We said we were going to talk about Ori. I think that is a perfect place to start off a conversation on African spirituality. But I'll go ahead and have you ask the questions because
Right.
yeah,
I had a question that I was considering over the course of looking through it. There's been folks in our church over the years who brought in kind of Kemetic, Egyptian centered stuff. And one of the concepts that was very helpful to a lot of people was the idea of the lower and higher self. So, in the structure of the lower self, represented by Set, the dog god, like the lower self, the passions, and then the higher self, which is like Horus, the Horus, kind of like, or it could be considered the Christ figure, like the part of you that kind of is above everything and looks at everything. Now, the way I saw the way the Yoruba people were doing it, maybe even before the Kemetic people, they had this concept higher than the higher self, which is the Ori, the connection, the little kind of like a godlike part of yourself that then connects to the great gods. Is that the great way? Is that a way to see it, like a kind of a gateway from yourself?
yeah, I would say that's a pretty good way to see it. And to speak, yeah, honestly, I'm not sure what's older, the Yoruba or the Kemet. There's like some debate, but that is a pretty good way of looking at your Ori. So I can give you like a rundown of the
Perfect.
concept as a whole. So Ori means head,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's where where the term Orisha comes from. It means selected head. It means that somebody who lived their lives like so close to the archetype of actual deity that they become that deity after they die. That they're
Mm.
like selected or we're selected to be within that archetype energy. So Shango, the Orisha Shango, did not become a Orisha until he lived a human life and died, and then he became his Ori was selected to become the Orisha Shango.
I see.
Uh, and so it really is this like your Ori is its own Orisha, and it's really the most important Orisha that you have to appease
Mm.
before you do anything else because it, along with your ancestors, can block any blessings or any activity you might want to be doing because it's not in alignment with your highest self. And so what happens is that before humans are born, or not born, but incarnated, well, I guess born too, but incarnated, they have what's called the egg bait, which is a spiritual family, and Orun, which is the concept of heaven the Yoruba have. And your Ori, and this part I am not entirely sure if you have access to your Ori and Orun, but your Ori along with Orun Allah who is the great witness of like human destiny and creation, along with Olodumare, and your Ori, plan out your destiny for your incarnated life. So that is really why you can really get any blessings without abusing your Ori or making sure you're aligned with your Ori. So it's this concept, because Yoruba have this concept that, past and present kind of all are happening, and future kind of all happening at the same time, because it's time is circular. It's not really a linear kind of concept. Yeah, so that in broad stroke is the concept of Ori, and they have like offerings and supplications, so you can appease your Ori as well, and prayers as well. So
if you could speak to that, friend, what kind of things do you do to appease or connect with your Ori? What are the things that would make it angry or not be able to cooperate with you? What are the things that please the Ori?
Right. So let me get past this busy street I'm crossing, and then I'll let you know. But the main of it, because there's actual prayers, there's actual prayers and there's actual offerings, but I don't know those prayers. I know some of those prayers, I don't do them. I should. And there's actual offerings as well to kind of realign you with your Ori. It's kind of similar to the concept of just good spirits in general. Like, and this is a kind of a spiritist framework, is that like pure spirits, if you're not walking the right path, will just leave. There is a motorcycle. It's gonna be a lot quieter once I get on the beach.
Oh no, that's great, friend. This is good.
But once it's if you're not aligned, it'll just leave, and it will come back, because spirits and in the heavenly sense, they don't really view time as this like thing that's chugging along. They understand that it's a cycle. So if you're not like aligned, you're going to just keep on repeating the cycle, and you're going to be stuck where you are. And your Ori will kind of sometimes just wait, if you're not abusing it, just wait for you to get out of that cycle, and then he'll come and help you out. So figuring out pretty much so much of African thought is really aligning your higher self with the rest of your worldly needs and whatnot. It's very much so like Ifa and Yoruba traditions, very much so about living this plane and this life very well. The spiritual or the afterworld concept is really not based upon too much. You would think it would be, right, with there being so much interaction with the spirit world, but it's really not. It's really mostly trying to align yourself on this plane. That's called Iwapele, which is means good character. So you have good character, so your Ori can then bless you. But there is like I said, there are specific ebos and things along those lines, but that's mostly like your Babalao or your initiated folk will kind of know that. So I don't know the sacrifices for sure, and I guess we could talk about the concept of sacrifices, because I feel like not every modern day religion still has them, right? But most modern day religions at some point have had them.
Please speak to that, friend, if you'd like to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what is your like understanding of it?
Well, I learned about sacrifice.
Yeah, because we know, like in Judaism, they were sacrificing a decent amount. I'm not sure if
Islam is not the same concept, and then of course the Christianity took it and made it a very small, like not small for the folk, but the concept of the Jesus taking over all the sacrifices expressed in the bread and the wine and stuff. But originally in the law, like there were different kinds of sacrifices for different occasions. There was sin offerings, there was peace offerings, there was these different things, and you would have to, this is when to bring this one. This is when to bring rams. This is when to bring turtle doves. This is when to bring like a heifer. These are different times at which, God. And there were times, interestingly, in the law where God would have Himself order him a sacrifice to Himself. So the red heifer was a thing. He, after seeing how in the desert the people had gone into idol worship. You had Aaron bringing a golden calf, trying to make a old-fashioned sacrifice. God got really mad because God, the way I'm looking at the God of the Bible is that He kind of grew from the old days of being kind of angry and lonely and insecure. I think the main thing to think of is insecure God. But as He became more secure, the sacrifices became more symbolic, and then eventually became, in the Christian tradition, the concept of meal also. The idea that you will eat the sacrifice rather than have to give it to God. There's that kind of interaction of God trying to be generous back and from His past, And this is specifically the Abrahamic God, that became a law. But that is interesting to me. But obviously there's various other ways, of which some of which might have something to do with that God's traditions, and there might be other ways to do it. So actually, I would invite you to speak on what you think about and what you've learned and know about the concept of sacrifice, if you want to.
Yeah. I would love to, because that's something that gets really, that's really scary for a lot of people when they hear like, oh, you're sacrificing animals,
Right.
And it's not like, this isn't like animal sacrifice. If you're having to sacrifice an animal, you're trying to rectify a fairly large issue in your life, especially if it's a four-legged animal. Mm-hmm. Same way with funny enough, like same way in Judaism, like God really wanted, the rams, the sheep, the bulls, but He would, if you were lower income, you would have fowl substitutes, like birds, turtle doves, and the et cetera, to be able to substitute instead. And it's a little similar for Yoruba. And it's really a life for a life, the same essence of living that animal has is the same essence of living that human have, and that source of life is divine. So when you're sacrificing an animal, you're really trading that life for the betterment of your own life. As humans, as being stewards of the land, we have a God-given position to be able to do that. And it just has to be done respectfully and in a way that doesn't cause the animal pain. And what they do is they tell their prayers and their supplications to the animal before it dies. So it can bring back to heaven and kind of rectify the forces of, I guess it would be called a Sobo, which is like the negative forces. Because like there's 401 Orisa, which are the good guys, right? And then you have, I'm going to say the Sobo or the Iyami. It's 401 of those too. Iku, which is death, like the negative sides. Orisha traditions are very much so still in duality. Like they're very much so a dualistic.
I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done. Yeah, very much so.
It's interesting. I see African. I mean, I don't know a lot about various African traditions, but seeing what you're speaking of, like the West African, Yoruba centric, obviously Igbo people are, and a lot of other cultures, but Yoruba centric. And then over in Kemet, way up in there, you actually have the concept of duality is a thing that both folks, even though they're far away from each other, are concerned with. And I think it's interesting because I'm not sure if it's a specifically African thought, but you can speak to that if you'd like to. But the idea that instead of it being
it's an African thought.
Well, I'm just trying to say duality, the respect for the concept that things aren't one or another thing. We've talked about this with my brother Anthony and other people, that the Western philosophy tended to get wrong because they tended to see I call it the era of Thales of Miletus, because he had gone to 22 schools in Egypt and flunked out of all of them.
Yeah.
Because he really did not know how to blend opposites or the relationship between opposites. So then when he started into philosophy, he had to be a major beginning question.
And who is this gentleman?
Thales of Miletus, the first philosopher, the father of Greek philosophy. He according to a friend of mine who was incarcerated, was a brilliant, read a lot inside and became a Kemetic, brilliant person. He gave us a lot of our early focus. He told me that these concepts of opposites is something that Thales of Miletus. Now he was respectful of Thales of Miletus. He said Thales of Miletus went to 22 of the 42 nones or universities or temples, if you will, of Egypt and studied them all. And that was my friend saying, "Oh, that's the connection." Now I was the one who was being snarky and saying that he flunked out of all of them. The reason I think he did was because I think by the end of the year you're kind of like, okay, now I've taught you everything. Now blend these opposites. And the man couldn't do it, so he went to the next one. I mean, that's my little poetry on it. But the problem but the idea of the European philosophy tends to be very focused on the difference between spirit and matter, whereas really, I think at least Kemet was trying to find the concept in the mind, symbolized by the glyphs and by the myths, of nothing is in itself without motion. So even a crazy god like the god of insanity, Keku, has Kauket as his mate. So Kauket is light coming, and Keku is light going away. It's not that he's darkness and she's light. It's like they're both light and darkness, but one is more going this way and one's more going that way. So I guess my question is, in the Yoruba tradition, do you see those similar things where, like, is there a reason there's 401 Orishas and 401 of, forgive me, their enemies, or a better word you could use, the 401? Iyami. How do you spell that, Fred?
Iyami.
Iyami. So those are kind of the opposite of Orishas. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's entities like Iku, which is death. There is loss. There is disease. There is like all these other aspects of more negative aspects that we deal with on Aye, which is Aye is Aye is the name for Earth, because Earth is its own deity,
Beautiful, beautiful.
But to speak on that, I think you have to divorce yourself from the notion of this very stark good and versus evil notion. I don't think any of the scriptures really have that for real, because the Abrahamic God was also on some pretty dark stuff, during the campaign through Canaan, was on some fairly dark stuff. So it's more of, I would say, expansion and contraction is the dynamic. And once you start to realize that, it's easier to blend those opposites, it's easier to understand because you're not already making a judgment on it. So I think that the Yoruba definitely have that. They have, there's like one working you can do, in one aspect, the answer could be the same working too. It might be for good or for bad, depending on what you are doing it for. It's really the perception or the context. It's not necessarily just the action. I feel like in Abrahamic religions, a lot of times they are like, this action's bad, Mm-hmm. And in Ifa, you really don't see that. Like, this action might be bad for you and your own Ori and your own destiny. And to speak more on, or to circle it back to Ori, your Ori also means your destiny. Mm-hmm. So, and this is really the main reason why people get initiated into Ifa or just the Orisa tradition is once you get initiated, you get what is called your top, which says your taboos. So what you said you wouldn't to be doing in its incarnation, and also it says what you should be doing to have prosperity.
Forgive me, could you spell that word?
Ita, ITA.
Oh, simply, okay. And that is the kind of the code of ethics you come up with, as well as, and its connection to the divine.
And everybody has a different one. Everybody is born with their own Ita. So what might be good for me and medicine for you might be poison for you,
right.
For me.
Well, one of the things we have in our bylaws in the last few years is the concept that everyone is encouraged to have their own personal spirituality. There's times we come together during the week, and there's times we come together during the year, but really hoping that everybody would take, the Jesus spoke in Matthew 6:6 of pray by yourself in the locked room. The concept of that, on one level, is not to be showy with your prayers and not trying to show off and not actually pray. But the other point is to have the spiritual thing that doesn't depend on other people or even your church to oversee you. So this idea of Ita that you have brought in, I appreciate it. I'm going to build on this with people too, is that really, and then we have different caucuses. Different people gravitate toward goddess stuff. There's people that gravitate toward Islamic, Sufi type stuff. And the reason, and all kinds of stuff, the reason is because we are trying to have a community where everyone's destiny can actually be what they should be, instead of everybody kind of going along with minister, whoever it is, or priest, whoever it is, or father, whoever. We need to, each of us, take seriously the fact that God gave each of us a life to do something with, which is very unique. So I love that concept. So these are concepts of what a person would, in their own way, have come to realize is negative as well as positive, and then they would follow that. Is that the idea?
Yes, throughout it's completely not within your hands, but it is, when you go to a babalao or when you get your Ita, it might take away, you might love chocolate, but Oshun says, I'm taking that away,
I see.
And you just have to do it. You either have to do it or not do it, and understand that your life is maybe going bad because you're not following your own Ori, which is your own self's higher advice. And a lot of times it's things that you weren't supposed to be doing that are pulling you out of alignment, but you just haven't taken the steps to correct. Like Obatala, people that are crowned with Obatala, who is the Orisa of purity and is the eldest Orisa, representing the dynamic of light and consciousness, and said to be the molder of man, the creator of man. His children tend to have really strict taboos, because Obatala, and the start of his career with an Aya, at least, was a drunk,
Interesting.
He was getting, he got intoxicated and was less than diligent.
So the children on their own decided to be stricter than the father was.
Yeah, exactly. And just when you get an Orisha or an energy, because everybody, so you have an Ori, and everyone's also born with Orisha that watches over them, kind of like the guardian angel concept. And this Orisha has qualities that you either are missing or exhibit. So you do. But Obatala stopped drinking after that anyways. He was very disappointed about his shortcoming. So he is just known as a very strict Maba.
I just find it interesting that the parallel I just saw was that if you look at the God of the Bible, he starts out kind of a raging, monstrous God, and he softens over time, and his children, if you will, the people who followed him, say Jewish or Muslim or all these people, they became more strict than God. It's interesting how it's a parallel. It's almost like the various peoples had certain concepts of that energy of God, and how they, in a way, were called to be. This will sound blasphemous if you're not ready for it, but if you are ready for it, you realize our job is to even be better than God, if we can, to show God how to be better. And then we can benefit from it and give back to God, not to be superior to God, but to be like a mother holding the baby, which is to take the Christian concept. So I'm trying to smush them all together, you know.
No, and that's a good way to be. I think part of the Abrahamic religion getting the people getting more stricter is also just outside influences coming in. You know, like it being used as a way of control rather than actual spiritual enlightenment. Same thing with like Islam. Like, is it Islam or is it Arabism? You know, and that's an important distinction. Because Sufism, which is known now today as like the more liberal, like maybe not even Islam, was the first Islam. You know, it was one of the first forms of Islam, and now it's kind of been, Islam is now almost synonymous with Arabism, which is not the case. But that's that's more geopolitics. I think when you're a mystic, you have to take in geopolitics, as even with Yoruba, like it was at first a very matriarchal tradition, but with the advent of global patriarchal agenda, you know, and colonization, it's turned into something different. Now, do the Orisa want that, or is that global geopolitics? You know, and I would say it's probably geopolitics.
Is there?
But no,
was there? Go ahead, friend. There's interaction, I think, between the divine and the things of the world. So, not that God follows man, if you will, but I think it's influenced by what people do. So, if they're, you know, because of the opportunity of the European concepts of masculinity, the European concepts which are very, you know, the warrior one. It's not a builder. He's not a farmer. He's not a lover of his wife. He's a guy who wants to go and hit the guy over there. And have that be, you know, infecting the world of Africa, infecting the world of Asia and Latin America, and all the places that the colonization went. You see that, you know, that gives you an opportunity to undo it. It gives you an opportunity to then learn more about it as the gods come back and all the spirits come back to relevance in people's lives after the old colonization period is fading.
Exactly, and we live in capitalism is just a masculine force because it's a force of expansion,
right?
Of like just unwavering and unappended expansion. You know, not caring about the structures that are needed to keep it, which would be actually a more feminine contraction. You know, to be able to build. But they're just caring about expanding. And it is very akin to the culture that colonized, you know, the world. There is really that influence on all cultures, unfortunately. Definitely Yoruba as well. But yeah, I think I covered and that if you live your Ori pretty good, you have to come back to Earth. You know, you go past this plane, and that is where like Ifa kind of stops. They don't talk about the actual goings on of the spiritual world. So that's why I'm also spiritist / I've been getting into spiritism and. I practice spiritism, not getting into, but I'm getting into Sufism, which is kind of the same. It has the same concept of Ori as well in a lot of ways. Besides it being a divinity, you know, you're just linked with God because you are God.
And the Christian concept is really in the Orthodox churches, which aren't as big in the United States, but Catholicism and Protestantism have it too, but. In the Orthodox churches, very much the whole point, exoteric and esoteric, is to become one with God, which is the Jesus concept that you could follow. You don't have to look at it that way. You can look at it in the more Nicene Creed way, where he's sitting up here and he sacrifices this way, and that whole concept, which is not without its use. But I think the more proper thing is for all these faiths and all these spiritualities to kind of connect in the fact that without being arrogant, because that's the wrong way to do it. You don't want to be God over other people, but you want to channel God, the actual God, through you, and all those spirits actually through you. And then, of course, with the Ori is like a gateway that if you do things, in the wrong way, or if you do things in a selfish way, or in any other way like that, you block that, as you said today. Like the idea that you, through prayer and relationship, but also through good living, through doing the right thing in the Ita concept, that to follow your own destiny and find out what it is, instead of just going to a. That's the whole point of like the Garden of Eden. They couldn't stay children forever. They had to make so-called mistakes to find out what the real world was, so they could grow up. And by the end, in Revelation, you'd have both the tree of life and the tree of knowledge be yours, instead of you getting kicked out for fear.
I think it's very the Garden of Eden experience, because I'm not sure if I told you my history, but I was raised a Jehovah Witness.
We have a lot of people in our church, friend. Just to say, we have several major people who helped form this stuff. Elders were from the Jehovah's Witness, including our Vice Pastor Sabrina.
Oh, yeah, very cool. I would love to talk to them about that, because I think it's very. If you dig into it, I'm not sure if they have. It's very. There's a strong spiritist influence on it, and not necessarily in a good way. But the concept, their concept was that the heaven was going to be on earth, and it was just humans reverting to Eden. Basically, is what the end goal for humanity is where humans live forever and don't die. And like you said, that's very childish, actually. I feel like if JWs were actually and I think the consciousness, the collective human consciousness, is catching up with that. Have you seen the show The Good Place?
No, I've not.
It's very good. It actually talks about like a lot of it displays a lot of the karmic systems of like just indigenous systems, very well, like how judgment is made and how like you have your spot in the afterlife, and obviously comedic and satirical way. Sure. But one of the things was that like if there was no death, no transitioning of being, after a certain number of millennium, you will get bored. Sure. You will want something.
Then heaven becomes hell. There's a Buddhist concept that we've talked about where you might sit in a chair like this and be very comfortable, but an hour later you might get fidgety. If you sat there for a whole day, you might even be achy. If you sat there for a whole year, you'd be in absolute agony. Yeah, and the concept that what you're saying, I mean, that's a Buddhist thought, but that's a similar thing. The thing I'd like to toward the conclusion of what we're doing, that the knowledge that you're speaking of, the knowledge I've looked at from Kemet, the knowledge of Abrahamic stuff that we've talked about, the knowledge of Buddhism, and knowledge of other folk, the Bible, the Christians and the Jews, and based on the Muslims and everyone based on, is the idea that God had to grow, and the people had to grow, to not take what was normally there and given them, but have to go find their own thing. And that there's something good about bad. There's something good about the negative, because it brought out the best in you. And that kind of tolerance is more adult, if you will, instead of everybody.
The Yoruba have this concept. So Olodumare, our supreme, and so our supreme deity is Olodumare, which is interesting. Like, he is not the beginning of the creation story, which is funny, but time is not linear. But Olodumare is our supreme being, and they break up into a trinity with Olorun and Olofi. Olodumare is I would say, the essence of creation, or the essence of being. Like if this is the essence of being, period. Because they're also in charge of the. Well, yeah, I would say because it's a little confusing when you talk about like, okay, what is the essence like this? And Sufism talks about this and like kind of elaborates on this concept a little more. The thing with Yoruba tradition and these mystic traditions is that you're required or expected to know all this pre-contextual things. But so Olodumare is kind of like the essence of being on this physical, plane. Olorun is the essence of being in the spiritual, and then Olofi is the physical laws, like the physical / spiritual laws that govern this simulation, this sandbox. But they don't. They're pretty. Like there are no prayers to Olodumare. There is no songs to Olodumare. There is this concept that Olodumare is very much so detached for the most part, and it's because the Orisa are doing the actual interacting with the physical and in a lot of ways spiritual realm, because they can grow, because they do have this contraction and expansion of self. And you can see, and you kind of need that comparison, like you said, to be able to tell, because Olodumare with like it is like an infinite concept, so it's very hard to attach yourself to that, really. And so it is interesting that, like, will say, and that always tripped me up too, that there was a stark difference between the God of the Christian God and then the God of the Old Testament. I'm like, are these the same? And that's why Gnosticism was so appealing to me, because it gave me a viable explanation. But the explanation of God just growing with us as well is really interesting as well, I would say.
Well, that's one of the reasons that our church was, founded, the idea that we have volition and agency in how we write down how God affects us and the imaginary worlds that we've come up with, so that we will continue the growth. Yes, the Bible, the Quran, the Gita, the Sutras, the Buddha, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's so many. The Voluspa was recently read by a brother John last week, of the Norse stuff, Norse mythology. Well, all of them are great, but the concept that really that unites us is that we have agency in how we all decide what to continue the tradition of writing it, continue the tradition of acting it out, of being part of it.
I will say that is these esoteric books are, and these books on morality are good. One thing I guess it's a little bit of a subject change, but the ability to find truth, I think, requires a certain amount of self-knowing.
Yes.
Because you have to know when the ring of truth is resonating within your body. And that's kind of where mysticism comes in. I think all these practices, if we're being real, are mystic practices. And at least the people teaching them need to be mystics. Because the body in all of these traditions is just an alchemical device to get us closer to the divine. But so many of us are detached from that state of being, of it being an apparatus for us to experience the divine with, that we don't even know truth when we hear it. You know what I mean? Even people in the Orisa tradition, this happens all because since we've been had our last conversation, I've been getting to a lot deeper into the actual in-person community. And they're not all mystics, you know what I mean? They're not all connecting the way that their ancestors would have been, because that was just mysticism was just the name of the game back in those days. That went without saying that you were also doing this kind of work. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame. It is all I have to say. But there's, I guess I have more. But there's an outlet. Like you can develop that, because like the ring of truth kind of is the same ring as two notes being in and key, two notes being in tone. That feeling of rightness, of harmony can be translated to truths, almost correctly sometimes if you have the right brain for it. And I think that's super powerful. I think that's one thing that that's helped me on my journey to be able to see like the truths woven in all these traditions,
Well, that's probably, if it's a good place, we could end the conversation on that, because I think that's so important. Well, I hope all this stuff to do. We talk to people from inside the church. We talk about friends of the church outside, trying to bring stuff together on the concept that the mystic should not be something scary the way the West tends to see it. It should, in fact, be thought of as the most wholesome thing in the world, to be connected to the whole of the world.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the many reasons I enjoy. I enjoy talking to you anyway, but I enjoy talking to you because of how we can relate on these concepts and the universality of these concepts. Because wherever the traditions are, there are things in the cultures and traditions that reflect and parallel the things you're talking about, the things I brought in from Kemet, the things that we're talking about from the Bible, and then Buddhism. Already we're talking several things, and yet we're considering, the same realities, which is that we are one with the divine, and how do we do that every day,
Yeah, exactly. And it really does bring this life into focus, and you have the potential to be able to live, in many ways, be able to live heaven on earth, because you start to be able to really appreciate creation for what it is, and the energy systems that are around you and at play in creation for what it is. And that helped me, I started it off with music, and it's been progressively going in other avenues. And I think that would be honestly a great topic to talk about, just the need for mysticism.
Let's talk about, maybe we could do it at some time in your convenience in the next week or two, whenever. We could just start out with that subject, and when we eventually have all the videos up, we'll have that after this one.
Perfect. And to conclude,
yes.
to wrap it up, so the Ori is your own personal deity, your highest self that was and is in heaven, watching over you, trying to get you to attain to its potential. And it can both work with you and against you. So you have to have an inner knowing to know when you are aligned with your destiny and aligned with your life, the grander scheme for your life.
Brother DC, thank you so much for all this information and for this knowledge. And we'll be talking more about it. And I've already understood certain things about what I was doing years ago in a different way just from this conversation. We'll talk more. I'll tell you some of the insight just from what you've already given me. So I appreciate you, friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
God bless you, friend.
God bless you.